Good evening, dear friends, and welcome tonight to another of our regular and ongoing meetings of the section for the Literary Arts and Humanities. Tonight, we're very happy to welcome North American poet Philip Thatcher once more to our meetings. Poet Philip Thatcher will be reading from his new book entitled Good Time, as well as from the book that he has read previously in our meetings, Fine Matter. Philip is the author of the Raven trilogy, in addition to Fine Matter, and born in Reno, Nevada, he currently lives in North Vancouver. He's the former General Secretary of the Canadian Anthroposophical Society, and he remains very active in that society, and he's a longtime member and friend of our section and very devoted supporter. I should say it gives me particular happiness to welcome Philip as a poet and to say once again how happy I am personally that poetry and creative writing have assumed once more a central place in our section. And as many of you know, that was a place that they occupied in the very beginning of the section with Albert Steffen. I do think, again, speaking personally, that it's noteworthy that Rudolf Steiner appointed a poet, dramatist, essayist, short story writer, and novelist to lead the section when he reorganized the society after the Christmas conference. He did not appoint a literature professor from a university, although, of course, our section includes literature professors, and there should be a home for them here. In fact, the poets and the professors of literature are siblings in that respect. We need them both. And Friedrich Hebel, a noted scholar, succeeded Albert Steffen, as you know, as the leader of the section following Albert Steffen's death. And now, in Dornach, we have a section leader who is both a visual artist and who has a doctorate in literature. So once again, these two realms of art and literary critical studies remain united, as they should be. And just a reminder that Christiana will be joining us on December 17th to speak about the Foundation Stone events in 1913 and 1923. Now, back to Philip, and to welcome him tonight, I'm putting up on the screen a picture of the cover of Fine Matter, very handsome cover that it is, published in Canada by our friend in the section, Ari van Ameringen. And following this picture of the cover of Fine Matter, I'm showing you the cover of Good Time. And now I've put on the screen a picture of the ordering information. If you're interested in acquiring books by Philip, you can purchase them directly from the publisher. The information is on the screen. Or you can purchase them directly from a bookstore in Pennsylvania, and all the contact information is right there. In case you want to follow up on the website, this information is also on the website, along with pages of Philip reading from his poems in previous meetings. And also, I should say, pages that feature other poets in our section reading their poems, since we have regular ongoing poetry nights. Now, before I hand the evening over to Philip, by way of finishing this introduction, I have put the back cover of Good Time on the screen, and I'll just read a little bit from this very fine review on the back cover by a professor of English from the University of Saskatchewan. In Good Time, the approaching chaos and its hopeful antidote are compressed into a period of 2 years. The time is navigated, but just barely. These poems define a moment in the ill health of our country and the entire world, but they also record a time in our lives when, however much is lost, something precious is rescued. And now, once more, I warmly welcome Philip to our meeting, and I'll turn the night over to him.
Tonight, I want to read from both books, Fine Matter and Good Time. I hope that's all right. We can still celebrate good time. And I want to do that around several themes. And the first theme is northern travel. A lot of my life the last number of years has been exploring the northern part of the continent, northern Canada, but also northern Europe, Russia in 2013. And the 4 poems I want to read in this northern theme, 3 from Fine Matter, 1 from Good Time, really come out of this northern journey. And the first is the North Cape. It is the northern tip of Europe. You drive this sort of ribbon of tundra and you come to this northern jut. Maybe not the real North Cape. There's a little bit of land further on that maybe qualifies, but this is where people come. And at one end of it, just far left-hand side, there is a metal globe. And in the night, in the evening, the young people who are around all go to that globe and they hang out there. They're climbing on the globe, leaning out over it. And that's the closing image of this poem. So, Nordkapp. North of 70 here, there is no pack ice. By the grace of the Gulf Stream, I drive past fields of sheep and more sheep until the last trees give way to raw tundra. Gray-green escarpments erupt here, roll together there, into the muted rise and fall of this stretch of Europe reaching north to the Barents Sea. I drive the last rising ribbon of tundra to the parking lot, then stand at the cliff edge. The low spit of land west of me is the true northern tip, but Nordkapp is where we come and still come, even though the midnight sun has gone and the season is spent. Yet the sea below me knows no season, holds the fog ever close, then releases, lets it lift away, allowing the illusion of a clear scene northward to hover just beyond the edge. Before the fog closes in once more and returns my scene to itself. The last tour buses gather in and leave. By evening, only the young remain. The sun has gone, yet they cling to the fence, clasp the ribs of the metal globe placed just back from the cliff face. At the end of this fading season, they lean out from every edge they know, reach for the sun they trust will never set. And then to the east, the northeast, the Norwegian-Russian border, and the border is the Pasvik River. North toward the Barents Sea, it's almost a stone throw from Norway into Russia. River's a bit wider further south. In some places, it's clearly marked where the border is. Other times, you have to sort of figure it out. It's not so clear. So this is Border River. Where the channel runs most deep, he says, there is the border. So that island is in Russia, and that one in Norway. Now and then a patrol boat cruises either side, but usually life as usual, right to the riverbank. Life as usual. The settlements on this side, right to the riverbank. On the far side, only forest, fronted by wire fence. Siberian taiga stretching east and further east. The border posts repeat themselves on either side of the Pasvik. Here, yellow capped with black. There, red striped with green. Each pair stands in silence throughout each long, then short day. But in the moonlit, no moon darkness, they began to speak, not the language of either shore, but in that other tongue that arches across the silent current and knows no border. And then to the south, the Russian-Finnish border. When I travel, I look as soon as I can for the nearest back road. And that's where I go and that's where I drive. I've done that for many years. And this time in 2011, the back road was right along the Finnish-Russian border. And I realized as I went, this is where the 1939 Winter War was fought. I was driving right along the front line of that war. And finally, it took me to a monument called Raatteen Portti, and here it is. You can get a look at it. I almost found it by accident. A tour guide directed me to it. It's created by the Russians and the Finns. There are 100 and, well, what is it, 4 stones? I've forgotten the number, but the stones number the Russian and Finnish dead. And the bells along the arches are the number of days of that war. I remember long drives along back roads, dust breathing itself into and through every crack and creaking of metal and glass, the engine coughing it up and out, determined to outride my unrelenting love for the back road. My children wondering why Dad does this thing he does, until their wondering becomes the story they tell their children or to anyone who will enter into the telling. The last one was along the Finnish-Russian border, the road winding through a no man's land, the front line I discovered of a frozen, battered letting of blood in the year of my birth. Now the monument remains, stones strewn across the field for each of the Finnish and Russian dead. And the standing together arches of Vara Sili, their wide embrace, stretched out above me into a cross of brass bells that tremble with every breath of wind. And then a fourth northern poem, this one from Good Time. There's a section in the book called Nuances of North. And in that section, there are 5 poems that have to do with listening to Northern musicians, composers. And the second of these is listening to the Northern Norwegian jazz musician, Tord Gustavsen, who came to Vancouver in January of 2020, one of the last to get in before COVID stopped all of that. So this is from that particular evening. Listening to Tord Gustavsen. On this January night, 10 degrees south of Oslo and a good distance west, your trio is attuned to hear the slow draw of the bow across the bass strings, a thin line across my snowbound land. The touches upon cymbal and drum, a brushing of wind against the prairie snowdrift. As your fingers feel through the keys, through each clear, clean note, strident or muted, chord interweaving chord, and the riffs stretching out, touching back, stretching out, touching back, the telling tug between heart and gut. Jazz that comes from the north. Your Oslo home that mid-afternoon in November, The sun at the horizon, its last fingers touching into the shadowy streets, along stone-walled buildings, along down an avenue of trees. That August night on the barren sea, the winter dark already near, as the Nordkapp stood off Berlevag waiting to go in, rocks so subtly by each intimation of wave upon wave. As your fingers hear rock notes and chords together, the rhythm of it sensing this place, sensing this time, as with the ones who came before you, probing their time and even foreknowing it. The ones I return to, Ellington, Coltrane, Monk, Brubeck's exploring chords, Miles Davis and So What, Mellow in 1959, Frantic in 1969. And a note of foreboding in what I hear now. Your fingers at the keys probing northeast to where that crack in a Greenland glacier widens toward a crevasse as the waters below anticipate and shudder. And then a second theme I'd like to share really has to do with family. And these three poems are from Good Time. There are a number dedicated to family members. One is to my daughter Fiona. Around the time she turned 49, she just finished a degree in psychological counseling at a local school. She'd already been practicing, but this was an important moment. So this was for her. This graduation day for Fiona at 49. This graduation day will let you get on with the next days of your life. Nothing much will change. There will be days that are just working days. The day you ask yourself, why am I doing this? And that miraculous day, so good, so true, you hear yourself saying, if I could choose my time to die, it would be now. It was never about crafting a career or making your mark, but about being true to those eyes that saw the healer in you and trusting what they saw. This day, you know that's something else about your healing art. That's something you may never name, but for which the lives you touch will be forever grateful. And the second is for my oldest grandson, Matthew, who at the end of his grade 12 year at the Vancouver Waldorf School was diagnosed with leukemia. So that was quite a journey for his mother, Fiona, the whole family. He's recovered a long time now, long in remission. He's now married, is studying law at the University of Victoria into his second year. But telling you that may give you maybe a little deeper sense of the closing lines of this poem. Baby Black Bear for Matthew. You were 6, maybe 7. My memory goes fluid here, as fluid as you were that day. We walked the Headwaters Trail, taking the upper path away from the creek, into the trees, into the haunt of the baby black bear. The telling of his story grew about your tongue as he shadowed us, slipping from rock to rock amid the dark of the trees, ever close to us, as your story tracked his every move. The hollowed out stump where his den could be, the bush ripe with berries where he would feed. You knew where he might go next, as the trail wandered high above the faint sounding of the creek. You knew him through and through as you unfolded his story, even as he eluded you, staying in the shadows close to us as things we must know and want to love sometimes do. And the ones whose stories shadow ours, close, often loved, even known. As you knew the story you told me, the one that led us into the heartland of the baby black bear. 3 poems around aging. Surprise, surprise. 2 from Fine Matter and 1 from Good Time. There comes a day, maybe an October day, that leans into you as a move through what remains of your life. Not your last day or even the one before. Nothing stops or pauses. And you know there will be a tomorrow and probably Tuesday next. And you reach for your date book as you have always reached. Yet this day leans just so. And now you look up alert for the next leaf to fall. The second one, called This Late Winter Tree. This late winter tree, stark and naked, tells a hard truth, puts a hard question to my own bones, not bare, not yet, not entirely. Yet now there is a lead edge to every day. Where then do those unessential things go when fully exposed? To what place of exile, to what graveyard? Do they grieve as they go? Or are they relieved, released from the pretense of self-importance? That which truly mattered once goes another path, grateful for having fulfilled its pact and ready to be at peace with the moment of leaving. Now the late winter tree remains, ready for that last barrel of life to rise as it will. This one from Good Time. Slipping away. How to say it? Slipping through my fingers, slipping out of my hands. What suddenly I cannot hold on to. Something now beyond the reach of my fingertips, beyond any holding onto it as it finds its way to the floor. Only a few as yet. The bowl cracked apart, one of a set, a fork, spoon, a glass or two, each its own modicum of sound as it lands at my feet. Only now and then, as yet, will I hold certain things with added awareness. The knives that mean business, no moving about with one in my hand while thinking of something else. And I marvel at the resilience of things, however fragile. The ones that stay intact, the crack at everything notwithstanding. And I imagine an angel standing beside me. Think of these moments as a practice for letting these things in your life return to themselves. As learning to let each thing go, to let everything slip away. And then another poem for a family member. This is for my son, Chris, who lives in Ottawa and who produces and edits a journal for the Canadian Army, for the Canadian Armed Forces. So interesting touch in relation to this poem. It's a Remembrance Day poem, Remembrance Day 2020 for Chris. We missed the wars, you and I. Timing and place were everything. For me, born just before World War II, too young for Korea, and in another country before the war in Vietnam shifted gears. For you, place of birth did it. No draft board in pursuit of you as it breathed along my neck and the neck of my generation. Yes, we missed the wars, knowing them through the stories of others, larger than life on film, relentlessly told in print, and now and then from the mouths of those who live them. Not knowing ourselves in that way. The slash of death into the one beside us, the coward lurking in the shadow of fear, along with the killer suddenly revealed, ready to kill again and again. We miss knowing in that way, but not the battlefields closer to the heart. The wars between within ourselves where every war begins. Where love can become hate and turn upon what was once loved. My neighbor becoming my enemy. Self warring against self, as words at odds with truth become the napalm of our time. As the smoke clears and a peace is achieved, for however long, we return to ourselves with war stories, veterans, everyone. Mindful of your midterms coming up, this was written in November 2019, looking toward your election in 2020. And in a way, it's sort of pictures where Canadians are in relation to pretty much any US election. It has nothing to do with us, and it has everything to do with us. So, towards a USA election. South of the border, the main event is about to begin. 11 months of rallies and rodeo, each aspiring bronc rider churning the turf as soon as the chute opens. And always that splash of Hollywood. We will look south at night and see the fireworks, watch the drama unfold on TV and in newsprint, listen to and consider the issues, be entertained, and worry when it cuts too close to our bone. With or without clothes, an emperor is still an emperor. I voted just once in the country of my birth. The ballot from my home state reached me at my college campus during my final year. Candidates' names spilled down the page, but I made just the single mark beside the one, John F. Kennedy. But that was long years ago. And on this November day, I would like to say to my once fellow citizen simply, your country, your election, good luck. Yet it is not that simple. The line between us is both border and bonds, as is each and every boundary etched into our earth. Like the ocean currents and great winds, there is a sheath of life wrapped around us all that would gather us in, whether we love or fight that thought. So I will say instead, I wish you well, all of you, all of us. Though that question still haunts me, what if JFK had lived? Even more, what if Robert Kennedy had lived? So 3 more. This is an Advent poem. Advent 2019, called At the Edge of Advent. The oak in the park is the last to lose its leaves. Copper emblems, both sword and shield, they hang from the lower branches, tinged by the late November light, always different on this weekend, of the first of the 4 Sundays, dropping like gossamer from the morning blue above, and suffusing the afternoon earth, streets, rooftops, the sides of mountains. To the south, a small plain rides the last of the light, veered north. Venus and Jupiter have crossed from Scorpio into Sagittarius, and a crescent moon sits high on the horizon, each one a beacon as the blue about them deepens. Now I think of you, Gabriel, one of the 7 archangels concerned with our earth, with the configuring of peoples, a turning in an epoch, ever alert for what might come to be, for the unveiling of a new threshold. All of that now a cloak about you as you stand before her and wait for her to answer the question in your words, a question to herself. How will your necessity become my possibility, my cradle to craft and to love? In the gathering darkness, you stand silently and wait for her to answer. So the last 2 really come from the question, when you craft a book, what's the last poem you put in? And one thought might be to put the one that you think will have the greatest impact, that goes out with a real bang. Those who are on the folk music scene know that you do not do that, particularly if you have an act coming up after you. You end with something that's not going to leave the audience standing on their heads. If you do, you will get told very, very quickly. So I want to read the last poem of Fine Matter and the last poem of Good Time, which really includes the kind of mood that I like to go out with. So the last poem in Fine Matter. To the end of the world. If I took the last train to the end of the world, I would sit by a window and watch the sun go golden. Beside me sits an alcoholic 3 days sober. Across from us, the girl who's been dying from the day of her birth hums a soft tune. Behind us sleeps the woman who last night slipped away from her battering husband. At the front of the car, a couple exchange words, their language known only to themselves. At the rear, an old man sits, his head against the seat back, and takes us in, knowing he is at last forgiven, knowing we are saints, each of us, all of us. And the last poem of Good Time, called There Are Flowers. There are flowers that are simply flowers, full of color in a space, just an open space. Not a wayside oasis with the ending of a quest. There is a day that is just a day on which nothing important happens, which doesn't make history, yet is grateful for having lived. There is a story that is simply a story with no drama in evidence or climax that takes the breath away. a story going its own path, keeping its end close to itself, saying, step inside, stand still, stand very still. Beyond the ending of it all, the tundra begins. This is where your feet take you now, step by step, day by day. At a distance, mountains flank you, no more yours to ascend. Attend now to this barren land, not barren, but release from what your life has been, from whatever would linger as spent imaginings. Let them ebb away in the cleansing Arctic wind. Do not look for the markers, they are behind you. Who you can be now, that is the Adukshuk that will open out this land that rises to meet each footstep. Its ground now sponge moss, now ancient rock, now earth going to gravel, sand, and fine matter. Somewhere in your last distance, there may be an esker rich with delicate life. Listen for it.